Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is the second of two information sessions on the needs assessment being conducted to assess Colorado's recycling services and evaluate areas of improvement. This webinar is focused on the municipal survey, so relates to questions that will be asked of municipalities in terms of how their services are currently provided across their municipality. Next slide, please. Your webinar team today includes Peter Hargreave, project representative for the Circular Action Alliance, the producer responsibility organisation that's conducting this needs assessment. Myself, Sarah Edwards, I'm the president of EUNOMIA Research and Consulting, and my colleague Caitlin Rees, who's a consultant at EUNOMIA. We'll be taking you through the bulk of the presentation, and then. Sorry, Kate, can you put yourself on mute? Sorry. Thank you. And then EUNOMIA's partner in conducting the needs assessment is Doug DeCise. Next slide, please. So before we get on to the details of the webinar, I just want to remind you of a few tips to make sure that we can all engage actively in this webinar. So please, if you are joining, join your audio either by phone or computer, not both. If we can ask that you provide and hold questions to the end. Obviously, your questions can be placed in the Q&A chat area at any time, and we will make sure we come to those at the end. There are two chat functions, so please make sure that as far as possible, you do put your questions into the Q&A chat. If we have time at the end, obviously, and we get through all the questions, we'll allow people to raise their hands and maybe verbally ask any questions as well. And if you, for ease of kind of communicating, if you would like to just add your name and organisation and affiliation after your name, so that we can understand who we're communicating with. Next slide, please. So the agenda for the next hour and 15 minutes will basically involve a welcome and an introduction to the needs assessment process and what we're trying to achieve. We will then go through the wider stakeholder engagement that's going to be carried out by EUNOMIA and HDR as the consultants delivering the needs assessment. And then Caitlin will take you through in more detail the survey, the buckets of survey questions that the municipality survey will include. And then a little bit on what next, and obviously, most importantly, allowing some time at the end for your Q&A. Next slide, please.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. So let me just start by saying thank you first to Recycle Colorado, to Ali and Liz for helping to arrange for this. And obviously, thank you to all of you that are joining today and taking time out to understand what we are going to be looking for and for participating in part of this process. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Peter. I'm the Colorado manager for Circular Action Alliance. I've been working in the EPR side for about 18 years now. Much of that time has been working directly with local governments and private sector service providers. I'll try to keep my slides as brief as possible because I think we do want to make sure that we've got lots of time to answer any questions that you might have. Next slide over. So Colorado signed its producer responsibility law for packaging and paper products in June of 2022. The objective of the legislation was to improve recycling outcomes for these materials in Colorado by expanding accessibility, ensuring a uniform statewide recycling list, encouraging better design decisions, leveraging current systems and infrastructure, and improving promotion and education. This, I think that the intention is that, this will lead to an expansion of recycling services for packaging and paper products across the state, and it will create new opportunities and be a net benefit to local governments. Next slide over. So producer responsibility laws place responsibility on the producers of designated products, so like what we're talking about today, packaging and paper products, onto the producer. So that the producer, which is considered usually the brand owner, the retailer, or the first importer of those products. So they are responsible often to fund and or operate recycling programs. The general concept is that producers have a greater ability to be able to improve outcomes through the decisions they make, whether that be how they design their products, how they invest, and their ability to invest in large-scale systems to collect and process their materials, and how they engage and use end markets for materials, like bringing those materials back into their products, using them as inputs. Colorado is one of 4 states right now that is moving forward with this type of legislation. So other states include California, Oregon, and Maine. Circular Action Alliance was selected as the producer responsibility organization for Colorado by CDPHE a couple of months ago. In very basic terms, a producer responsibility organization is essentially a compliance organization that helps producers organize and meet their legislative requirements. So when we're talking about that for Colorado, that means working with all the key stakeholders to implement a new statewide recycling program and figure out how to improve the outcomes that are currently happening today. Next slide over. So this slide really just sort of provides a bit of an outline of sort of what's ahead, specifically with the needs assessment, which we're here to talk to you about. It's a very condensed timeline. Circular Action Alliance was selected in May, and we immediately began the process of tendering out the needs assessment and awarded that contract to HDR and EUNOMIA. The needs assessment is really an in-depth study that's meant to assess Colorado's existing recycling system and identify opportunities for growth and improvement to that system. It's meant to sort of provide the roadmap for Circular Action Alliance to inform how they put forward a program and how CDPHE sets forward with their rulemaking process. So it's essentially, it's the first building block, and it is very important in making sure that we get all of our decisions right afterwards. So this part is very important. So we want to make sure that we're working with all of you who have the knowledge and expertise on the ground to inform us as we go forward. Our needs assessment must be completed by January. As I mentioned, it's a tight timeline. And so I know we've certainly heard from others that we are asking for information in a very quick timeline, but we need that information because we need to move on sort of in the November, December timeline to making sure that we're modeling and doing analysis on different scenarios that we then can bring forward to the joint committee. So it's a short timeline. And so I, certainly would prefer if we could provide you with more time, but we do have a short timeline ahead of us. You'll likely hear this multiple times from many of the guests speaking today, but I want to make sure that I'm clear that you may not have access to all of the information that we are looking for, but any participation in this is helpful. We want to make sure that we are understanding as much as possible as to what is happening on the ground. What are some of the barriers? What are some of the opportunities? Understanding how the system is actually functioning. So we want you to participate in any way that you can as part of this work. Next slide over. And the next slide just deals with, really who we are as an organization. So Circular Action Alliance, we are a nonprofit, tax-exempt 501c3. We're established to support the successful implementation for paper and packaging, not only in California, but are in Colorado, but also in other states across the country. We were officially incorporated in December of 2022 with 18 companies from food and beverage to consumer goods and retail industries represented in our founding members. So each of those members right now is represented on the slide. We are seeking to provide a flexible platform to meet producers' needs across different states and to create greater economies of scale for how recycling systems can be put in place across the country. That includes sharing resource, knowledge, and expertise. Important to note that the financial resources are dedicated state by state, and there is a dedicated Colorado board which was established in June. Board members in Colorado currently include General Mills, Mars, Swire, Walmart, Clorox, PepsiCo, and we have 2 non-voting members right now, the Colorado Beverage Association and the Consumer Brands Association. We are in the process as well of looking at what additional potential appointments may be needed to add additional diversity and skill sets to the board that is in place. Next slide over.
So just back to me. So thank you, Peter. So obviously HDR and EUNOMIA are really excited to be working on this project and working with all of you to understand the services provided in Colorado from an municipality standpoint. Year experience working in Colorado, and EUNOMIA brings to the table over 21 years of designing and modeling EPR systems and recycling systems from a broad range of materials, and has been operating in North America for over 6 years now. Recognizing that we can't do this alone, we've also brought in a number of subcontractors who have not only local experience like LBA associates, but also skilled associates in areas such as collection option modeling and design for recyclability. Next slide, please. So just as an overview, the objectives of the needs assessment really, as Peter outlined, is to measure the existing and in the future needed recycling programs and infrastructure across the Colorado region. So we'll be asking for questions. We'll ask in terms of what services are currently being provided and who's providing those services to what household types. We'll be looking specifically at not only just services to single family, but multifamily, as well as schools, municipal buildings and small businesses. And as part of those questions, we'll also be trying to ascertain information on performance levels. So that not only includes information such as the amount of material that's being collected, but also information on accessibility and participation and overall arching recycling rates for packaging and paper products specifically. The questions will also delve into some of the costs of the current services, and we know that this is obviously a complex suite of questions, but as Peter said, the questionnaire, what we want to try and make sure is that you answer as much as you can within that questionnaire. No small amount of detail is too little, so please do add whatever you can when you receive that questionnaire. And we're also going to try to understand obviously where materials are flowing to and where they're going to be sorted and processed, and also what those end markets look like both in Colorado and outside of Colorado. And all of this will be used so that we can develop the future recycling service scenarios that could be implemented in the future. Next slide, please. So just to give you a very high level overview of all the different components of the needs assessment, as I said, this survey specifically is for municipalities, and this will obviously inform a number of the different elements in terms of the complete needs assessment. So this is really going to be questions related to the residential collections that might be made to non-residential properties that I mentioned earlier, like schools and government buildings, and the questions will bring in some elements of understanding the contamination, the education that you might be carrying out, as well as what materials you are collecting both at the curb and through drop-off facilities. And all of this information through these different elements will be fed into element 13, which is where we model those future scenarios. Next slide, please. So just in terms of stakeholder engagement, as I said, this webinar is specifically around the municipality survey. But if you just move on to the next slide, we'll just give you an overview of the different types of outreach that we are having in order to gather information to feed into this process. So in addition to this municipality survey, we'll also be carrying out some interviews with municipalities that are directly delivering their services. There will be a separate hauler survey that HDR is running, and again, additional interviews with haulers to ascertain information from those service providers. And then site visits have already been started with MRFs and composting facility and transfer stations, again being carried out by HDR. And then finally, EUNOMIA will be looking at speaking to recyclers and end markets, potential current and future end markets within the state. And as part of this process, really what we're asking you is to just actively engage, work with internal stakeholders and potentially service providers to provide as much data as possible, and recognizing that we do have a very short turnaround. So any information that you provide will be valuable to this process. Most importantly, obviously spread the word in case others haven't had notification or haven't been able to join this webinar. This webinar and a list of frequently asked questions will be placed on Recycle Colorado's website later this week. Next slide, please. I won't touch on this too much because most of it's been covered, but obviously we've had the 2 municipality webinars today on Tuesday. We will be sending out the survey for municipalities will open on September the 18th. And we have a very quick turnaround, but asking for those survey responses back by October the 13th. There is, I'll share with you shortly, a dedicated email address where you can pose questions as you're working your way through the questionnaire survey, but also we're going to have 2 days of drop-in sessions. So you'll be able to schedule a 15-minute conversation with our team to go through any specific questions you may have and want clarification on. And below the line there, you could just see those other stakeholder engagement processes that we have ongoing that I've mentioned. Next slide, please. So now into the municipality survey, which I think I'm going to hand over to Caitlin to take you through.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So now I'll share some information on how to complete the survey and then an overview of the types of information that we're looking for. So on completing the survey is really intended to collect information about a municipality. So a municipality can complete the survey, or a county can submit on behalf of a municipality. And so if a county oversees services in multiple municipalities, we'll also be asking those counties to submit information as well. And if your municipality works closely with the hauler, you may also share the survey with the hauler to work with them to complete it. And as a note, we are really working to preserve personal privacy, as we're not at all interested in obtaining any information about individuals. And then all data will be requested at the service or municipality level. And this data will be held confidentially, and it will be consolidated and anonymized. So if any concerns remain about the confidentiality of the information being provided, please email EPRNeedsAssessment at eunomia-inc.com, and you can request a formal non-disclosure agreement, and we'll work with you on that. So then within the survey, there are some questions that are more essential and some that will be optional. And the idea here is that we really want to collect as much information as possible, and we do not want a lack of information to prevent anyone from submitting a survey response. So please just submit what you can. And additionally, if there's any supplementary information that you all have, such as reports or data files, these can be sent to the same email address that I just mentioned. And then the survey will be distributed via email, as well as posted to the Recycle Colorado webpage. So if you filled out the interest form or attended a webinar, which you all have, you will be receiving the survey via email. And since there may be multiple recipients within one local government, we're asking that you all do your best to coordinate with one another to limit the duplication of responses. And additionally, the survey will be distributed with a PDF file that previews a list of all the survey questions. So this will allow you to look through them before submitting. And we hope that this helps you all prepare for the survey and will allow you to ask others for information as needed. So now an overview of the survey design. The survey is broken out into 5 sections listed here: general information, service provisions, operational and performance data, cost data, and other questions. And the bulk of the survey will focus on those three in the middle. So service provisions, meaning how trash and recycling collection services are provided, operational and performance data, meaning how the different programs are performing, whether it's drop-off facilities or curbside collection, and cost data, meaning questions about the costs of the various services that are currently provided. And some of these questions, they might seem obvious to you all, but it's important that we confirm and hear this information directly from you. We know that each of your communities are different and unique, and we want to avoid making any assumptions where possible. And this data on the whole will be crucial to our understanding of the current system and directly correspond to the future scenarios that are developed, as has been mentioned. So in short, the better the data that we receive from you all, the better our recommendations will be for how to improve the statewide recycling system. So we'll now discuss these 5 areas in more detail to help you prepare for what kind of information we'll be asking of you in the survey. And we're not going to go through every individual question today, so don't be surprised if you see a few that we don't specifically talk about today. But that said, most questions should not be a surprise after we go through these topic areas. So general information, this is the most straightforward part of the survey. It's required because we need to know which municipalities and counties have completed the survey and who to follow up with if there are questions about the information that's provided. And as a reminder, any of this information provided, such as your name and email address, will be kept completely confidential, and we will only use this information to reach out to you all with questions or updates about this process. So now moving on to service provisions, this next section is about trash collection and disposal. In an attempt to keep things as easy as possible, we've broken the survey out into subsections. So for trash collection and disposal, and then the second is about recycling collection, transfer, and material recovery facility sorting. Part of the needs assessment is identifying opportunities to improve recycling rates, which requires taking into consideration how convenient recycling is, and this will be done by comparing it to the equivalent services provided for trash. So having similar information on trash and recycling will allow us to compare between the two. The trash collection and disposal section begins with a question asking about if the jurisdiction has ordinances requiring trash collection at different types of accounts. So this includes single-family homes, multifamily homes, government buildings, schools, commercial businesses, as well as on-street and public spaces. And the next questions are about the types of services available to each of those account types, such as curbside or drop-off service, followed by questions asking who operates each service and the number of accounts served, schedule or frequency of collection, types of collection bins provided, and disposal location, as well as total annual amounts. So moving on to the recycling section of service provisions, you'll notice that these questions will be very similar to trash and disposal questions, and one key exception is the collection type. So this will get at whether recycling collection is single stream or source separated. And another difference is where the materials will go. So this will include transfer stations as well. And while not specifically called out here, the recycling questions will also include questions on organics collection as it relates to the acceptance of compostable packaging. So on to the next section, operational and performance data. These questions will dive into greater detail about the services provided, and this will give us just a deeper understanding of what is necessary to provide the current level of services. So for each drop-off facility in your jurisdiction, the survey asks for general information such as the address, operating hours, and staffing, as well as details such as the types and tons of materials collected in 2022. And as we've stated before, not all of these questions will be essential. So if you can provide data from a service provider, then we would love to have it, but please do not be afraid to leave gaps in the survey. For trash collection, the survey will ask about the collection process and potentially different types of routes that are taken, such as urban or rural. And then again, all of these questions, not all of these questions will apply to those municipalities that contract services. And so when we're analyzing the cost data in the next section, the detailed operational and performance data from this section will enable us to provide the most accurate possible predictions of the costs of the different future scenarios that we'll consider towards the end of the needs assessment. And again, the better data that we have to feed into our analysis, the more realistic the results will be, and ultimately the better the outcome for Colorado. So here we have listed similar information for recycling, a couple key differences. In addition to tonnage of material, the survey asks about different types of materials that are collected or accepted and their tonnages. And in addition to disposal locations, the survey may ask about transfer locations and material recovery facilities. As above, if you're not providing directly or through a hauler recycling services, you will likely not be directed to these detailed questions on the survey. And then lastly, for the operational and performance data section, there will also be questions related to the performance of services, and this may include estimates of contamination rates and participation rates if known. Now moving into the cost data, a large part of the needs assessment is understanding the current cost of recycling and how this would change with the future scenarios. So we understand that this type of information can be difficult to collect, and these questions are really targeted at municipalities that offer their own services. Cost data will focus on the cost per household, and in the case of a municipality directly delivering services, it could include further details on labor and vehicle costs, for example. And for counties operating drop-off facilities, again, this could be more in-depth operational cost data. As a reminder, this information will all be completely anonymized. For trash collection and disposal costs, the survey may ask about disposal cost per ton and the average cost to households, and potentially bundled rates where trash and recycling are grouped together or grouped with other services. And then for recycling, collection, transfer, and sorting costs, the survey may ask about total gross costs for collection, transfer, and material recovery facility or MRF sorting, and the percentage of these costs that are providing to single family versus multifamily versus commercial, and the cost per ton for transfer. Lastly, other questions that we may ask about, is there a waste or recycling composition analysis for the municipality? And the more recent, the better. Any special considerations for the area, such as private roads or requirements for wildlife resistant containers, any voluntary waste programs in the area that supplement the provided services, and any education campaigns or initiatives. There may be some more detailed questions about partnerships that you all have for these campaigns. And this information will provide additional context that will help us understand the full picture of waste management in each of your municipalities. So now that you have an understanding of the survey, what is next? For support and deadlines, as mentioned, stay tuned for the release of the survey next week, which will be distributed via email and also posted on Recycle Colorado's website. And after the survey has been released, we will have drop-in sessions on September 26th and 27th. And these will be opportunities for you all to ask questions that are coming up in the process of completing the survey. So we will be sending out a link that you can use to book 15-minute drop-in sessions for your specific questions. And then all questions that are compiled from these drop-in sessions, as well as questions from our session today, will be added to a frequently asked questions document that will be made publicly available on Recycle Colorado's website. And then if there are any questions that are not answered today during this session and you can't wait for the drop-ins or they come up at other times, these can be sent directly to the email address that I've mentioned, EPRNeedsAssessment@eunomia-inc.com. And when sending emails to this account, please be sure to put the name of your municipality in the subject line of the email. Finally, the survey must be completed by October 13th, but really the sooner that we get information from you all, the better, so we can begin to process and get a handle on all of the information available. So even if you do not have all of the information the survey asks for, again, please complete what you are able to, because really all information in this process is valuable. And we understand that we're asking for a lot of information, and this is because we want to capture everything that we can. We really do not want this to deter anyone from submitting survey responses. So even if you do not have an answer to every single question, please just submit what you can. Because if your municipality does not respond to the survey, it will limit our understanding of the current state of recycling in Colorado, and therefore limit the future scenarios we develop and the recommendations that we put forward to Circular Action Alliance for improvements. So the information you all can provide is really a crucial piece of this process, and please submit what you can. And then finally, we have listed here contact information. Again, this is the email address. So if you have any questions about the municipality survey or the municipality research that we're conducting, please direct them to this email. So thank you all so much for attending today. We know that was a lot of information, and we'll spend the remaining time doing a Q&A session. So we will not be recording the Q&A session. So I'll now ask Allie to please stop recording.